The afternoon had that brittle stillness that came before trouble, the kind Eli Turner had learned to read the way other men read newspapers. The sky was too wide and too pale. The sun, a bleached coin, hung high above the mesquite flats. Wind slid low across the ground, whirring at dust and dry grass, making the thorns whisper secrets to one another. Eli slowed his horse, Ranger, letting the animal pick its way along the faint track that followed the creek. He hadn't planned on riding this far out, but the quiet at the ranch had pressed on him all morning, a weight behind the ribs that only movement ever seemed to ease. He hadn't seen another person in weeks. The nearest town lay a day's ride south, and the neighboring spreads were little more than rumors. Fences half fallen, owners long gone or buried under names the wind had already begun to erase. Eli told himself he liked it that way. Solitude was honest. It didn't ask questions. But some days like this one, the quiet grew sharp around the edges. That was when he noticed the smoke. It wasn't much, just a thin ribbon lifting from the cottonwoods along the creek. Easily mistaken for dust or heat shimmer, Eli reined in, squinting. Ranger's ears flicked forward, alert. Smoke meant people, and people meant trouble as often as it meant company. Eli rested a hand near the saddle horn, feeling the familiar grain of worn leather, and urged the horse closer at a careful walk. The creek bent around a stand of cottonwoods, their leaves flashing pale and dark as the wind turned them. Eli circled wide, not wanting to startle anyone, and that was when she rose from behind one of the trees as if the earth itself had given her up. She stood straight and still, watching him. An Apache woman, young but no child, her posture steady as a drawn bow. Her hair was braided tight, black as whetstone, and her eyes were dark and sharp, missing nothing. She wore a buckskin dress, weathered and practical, but a long tear ran along the side where thorns had caught it, the leather frayed and uneven. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved between them, tugging at her dress, carrying the smell of smoke and creek water and something wild Eli couldn't name. He realized he had been staring and felt heat crawl up his neck. She noticed. "Don't do that," she said, her voice calm but edged. She gestured at the tear with a quick, embarrassed motion. "It's torn, please." The words landed harder than a slap. Eli swallowed and tipped his hat at once, eyes dropping to the ground. "I'm sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to be rude." Silence stretched again, thinner this time. He could feel her weighing him, measuring the distance between apology and intent. Slowly he slid down from the saddle, careful to keep his movements easy and open. He kept his hands where she could see them. "Name's Eli Turner," he said. "I run cattle east of here. Didn't expect to find anyone this far out." She studied him, gaze steady, unblinking. He wondered what she saw, a lone rancher with dust on his boots and much quiet behind his eyes, or just another stranger on stolen land. After a long moment, she inclined her head. "I am Naya," she said. "My horse was spooked in the storm last night. I followed the creek, hoping to find him." Eli nodded, glancing at the sky, remembering the thunder that had rolled through before dawn. Storm came hard. Animals don't like that kind of noise. He paused, choosing his words. "You hurt?" "No," she shook her head. "Only the dress." Her fingers brushed the torn seam, frustration flickering across her face before she smoothed it away. The mesquite took it. Eli felt the old itch to fix things rise up in him, the same urge that had kept him patching fences long after dark, mending tools that might have been easier to replace. "I've got thread back at the ranch," he said. "Not much, but enough to hold leather. Or I could spare a blanket till you mend it." Her eyes narrowed just a fraction, not unkindly but cautious. "Your ranch is close?" "Half an hour east," he said, pointing with his chin. "You're welcome to it. No obligation." The wind gusted, snapping the loose edge of her dress against her leg. She shifted her weight, considering. "People talk," she said quietly. "Even when they are not there." Eli met her gaze then, steady as he could make it. "Out here, talk travels farther than truth," he said. "But I mind my own lines." Something eased in her expression, a tension unwinding just enough to show. She gave a small nod. "I will take the thread," she said. "I will not stay." "That's fair," Eli said. He moved to Ranger's saddlebags and rummaged until he found a small tin, dented and familiar. He held it out to her, arm extended, stopping a respectful distance away. Inside lay a needle and a spool of coarse thread, the kind used for harness repairs. She took it, their fingers not quite touching. "Thank you," she said. She sat on a fallen log near the creek, turning slightly away as she began to work, fingers quick and practiced. Eli busied himself with Ranger, loosening the cinch, pretending great interest in the creek's muddy bank. He felt acutely aware of her presence, of the shared pocket of quiet they occupied, and of how easily it could be broken. After a few minutes, she spoke again.
You live alone?
Eli hesitated, then nodded. Have for a long while. Does it suit you? She asked. He considered the question, the way it cut closer than most. Some days, he said honestly. Some days it's just loud in its own way. She gave a soft sound that might have been agreement. The needle flashed as she pulled the thread tight. The land teaches us to listen, she said, even when we would rather not. Eli smiled despite himself. It does. When she finished, she held the seam up, inspecting it. The tear was still visible, but it would hold. She rose, smoothing the dress, dignity settling back into her stance like a mantle. It will do, she said. She returned the tin to him. You have been respectful. I aim to be, Eli said. If you need help finding your horse, I will find him, she said, not unkindly. But thank you. They stood there for a moment, the creek murmuring, the wind easing as if satisfied. Then Naya turned toward the cottonwoods, whole again, and Eli watched her go without staring this time, feeling the quiet shift, altered by the brief, careful meeting of two lives on the wide, waiting land. Night settled over Turner Ranch, the way a blanket settles over a tired body, slowly, deliberately, bringing with it a hush that felt earned. The storm that had chased Naya and Eli in from the flats had softened to a steady rain, tapping the tin roof in patient rhythms. Inside the cabin, lamplight cast a warm, honeyed glow that pushed the shadows back into the corners. Though it could not quite banish them, the place smelled of wet wool, coffee grounds, and old wood that had absorbed years of smoke and solitude. Naya stood just inside the doorway at first, taking it in. The cabin was small but orderly, built with the kind of care that came from a man used to doing everything himself. A narrow bed against one wall, a rough table and two chairs near the hearth. Shelves lined with jars and tools whose purposes were worn into their handles. Nothing fancy, nothing wasted. It told her more about Eli than his words had. You can set your things there, Eli said, gesturing to the chair farthest from the bed. He closed the door gently behind them, the sound of the rain suddenly louder for it. I'll keep out of your way. She nodded and crossed to the table, untying the shawl from her shoulders. The tear in her dress was more obvious in the lamplight, the frayed edge catching on itself. She laid the fabric across her lap and reached for the needle and thread he'd brought in from the saddlebags, testing the point against her thumb. Eli hovered for a moment, uncertain, then turned to the hearth. He poured water into the kettle, though he'd already had more coffee than he needed, and set it over the coals. The small familiar task steadied him. He could hear the soft rasp of thread through leather behind him, precise and unhurried. The rain thickened, drumming harder now, and thunder rolled somewhere far off, a low, tired sound. Eli glanced over his shoulder despite himself, then looked away quickly, reminding himself of the line he'd drawn. Respect was not a thing you said. It was something you did again and again. You keep this place ready, Naya said after a while, not looking up. Habit, Eli replied. Storms come whether you're prepared or not. I'd rather be prepared. She smiled faintly at that, the corner of her mouth lifting. My people say the same in different words. The kettle began to sing. Eli poured the water and set a cup on the table, then hesitated. Coffee? He asked. Or just hot water? Water is fine, she said. He slid the cup toward her, stopping short of her hands. She waited until he stepped back before taking it, fingers warming around the chipped enamel. For a moment, the only sounds were the rain and the stitch, the quiet shared without strain. You said you followed the creek, Eli said eventually. If your horse doesn't turn up by morning, I can help look. She tied off a stitch and considered. I may take you up on that, she said. He is strong, but the land is wide. Wide can be lonely, Eli said before he could stop himself. Her eyes lifted then, meeting his. Not probing, not accusing, just seeing. Yes, she said softly. It can. She returned to her work, and Eli felt something settle between them, an understanding that didn't need more words. He busied himself wiping the counter, straightening things that were already straight, giving her the space she had not asked for but clearly needed. The rain eased again, the storm moving on as storms did, leaving the air washed and cool. Naya finished the seam and ran her fingers along it, testing its strength. Satisfied, She tied the final knot and cut the thread with her teeth. She smoothed the dress and stood, rolling her shoulders as if shedding the day's weight. "It holds," she said. "I figured it would," Eli said. "You stitch like you mean it." A brief laugh escaped her, surprised. "I have had practice." She folded the shawl and draped it over the chair. For a moment she seemed unsure where to stand, the smallness of the cabin pressing close. Eli gestured toward the hearth. "You can warm yourself," he said. "I'll step outside if you want." She shook her head. "You do not need to leave your own home." He nodded, relieved. They stood side by side near the fire, not touching, heat rising between them. The lamplight softened her features, but there was strength there, etched by sun and wind and choices made on the move. "Why stay out here alone?" she asked, not unkindly. Eli stared into the coals, watching them pulse. "Didn't start that way," he said. "But people leave. Sometimes they die. Sometimes they just decide the quiet's too much." He shrugged. "I stayed." "Staying is its own kind of courage," she said. He smiled, small and wry. "Some days it feels more like stubbornness." The rain stopped entirely. Outside, the night insects began their tentative chorus, testing the air. Naya turned toward the door, instinct pulling her toward the open dark. "The storm has passed," she said. "I should go." Eli's chest tightened, but he nodded. "You're welcome to stay till morning," he offered, careful to keep his tone even. "Floor's yours. Or the bed, I can take the chair." She looked at him for a long moment, weighing not the offer but the man. "I will sleep near the fire," she said at last. "Just until dawn." "Of course," Eli said. He fetched a blanket and laid it out, then stepped back. She settled near the hearth, composed, the day stitched closed. Eli took the chair by the table, setting his hat on his knee, the space between them clear and respected. As the lamp dimmed and the fire burned low, the quiet returned, but it was different now. Not sharp, not empty. It held the shape of shared shelter, of boundaries honored and trust given carefully. Outside, the land breathed under the stars, and inside the small cabin 2 lives rested, stitched together not by need or desire, but by a simple, hard-earned kindness that might in time hold. If you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.